What's going on, everybody? We are back. Episode number 164 of the Club and Podcast. I am back on the show tonight. I did miss last week. I was away for work and unfortunately got called into a meeting right before the show was about to start. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Tonight we got UFC Vegas 85, Roman Dolidze taking on Nassourdine Imavov. Interesting card, kind of fun. Before we just get into it, last week I went up 4.5 units. Lags, how did you do? We're not going to go through a whole thing here because Lags has a hard stop coming up, but how did you do, Lags?
Lost about 1.5 units. Not great bets overall, but did bet Jimmy Flick small.
I bet Jimmy Flick
only winner of the three.
Sadly, Sean Strickland stopped the night from being a completely massive night. But anyway, we will move on and we'll jump right into this because I do know Lags does have a hard stop here.
Sure.
First fight of the night, we have The Rock. Friend of The Rock, I guess. We got Themba Gorimbo. He is taking on Pete Rodriguez.
That's first fight of the night?
That's what I'm seeing on Tapology right now.
Okay. Never mind. All right, go ahead.
I think they might have reshuffled it because this was not what I originally thought was the first fight of the night. But yeah, current price on Gorimbo -250. Come back on Pete Rob +210. I'm sure if you watch other podcasts, you've probably seen the pro Pete Rodriguez takes this week. And I can't say I totally disagree with them in that, like, I think Themba is a pretty big liability everywhere. Very easy to hit on the feet. I don't think he is particularly durable. And, even in the grappling, as a proactive grappler, Gorimbo, obviously. Can you hear my dog in the background? Fucking chaos. Unbelievable. Yeah, we have a pizza guy just came. Anyway, I don't think Gorimbo is the most positionally sound grappler. Like, he's not bad. He's proactive about it. But, he loses position against a lot of guys and some really bad guys. And on the other side, you have Pete Rodriguez, who I think, he's clearly the better striker. He's clearly the better hitter of the two. I guess the issue for me and why I'm not really overly tempted by the Rodriguez side is, first of all, the guy's fought. Let me look at his UFC fights. Came in short notice against Jack, got butchered. I don't really care about that. But then they gave him a journalist. Like, he fought Mike Jackson, who's like a journalist and a photographer in his next fight, who he knocked out. So it's like, I don't care about that either. And you go through his regional fights, they're all against utter bombs. There's like 4 of them. Knocks them all out. Don't care about those. And then if you go all the way back to, amateur days, there is some tape of him getting grapple fucked. And so, like, I don't know, like, Pete's upside here is it turns out that he's got way better takedown defense than his amateur days and he knocks out Gorimbo. But, the downside is he gets easily grapple fucked by the guy with way better cardio, who's way more experienced, way more tested with a much better process. To me, it's like, I get the takes for Rodriguez, but I could see Themba covering -250, whereas I can't really imagine Rodriguez, being a favorite if the fight goes 15 minutes. Like, what are your thoughts, Lags?
So first, I did just refresh Tapology. The Peterson Pogues fight is the first fight, according to what Tapology is.
Oh, you are right. Well, we're here, so
it's okay. It's okay though. I know. We'll talk about this. Kind of wants to play like either Pete KO 1 or just a bit of the under 1.5. Not even the under 1.5. Almost just because, like, I feel like it's mostly Pete correlated. But yeah, I almost just want to play into the question marks of his cardio and of his defensive grappling. I just think at a big number for the KO 1, it's not bad. But yeah, to your point, hasn't really fought anybody, and it could easily just snowball outside of round 1. But I think anybody taking the round 1 pokes, I don't hate, but money line is just kind of, I wouldn't want to play into the.
The thing is, like, even with the KO 1 though, like, I understand, like, principally why people would take that shot. But I'm not even sure Pete's got big power. Like, he knocked out Mike Jackson, and he knocked out a bunch of, like, look at the records of the guys he was fighting regionally, man. This guy has fought, like, literally no one. So I don't know.
I think Gorimbo's pretty wooden on the feet too. Like, he's there to be cracked for sure. So
he is. It's just like, I've seen some people I respect with, like, pretty passionate PKO 1 takes. I'm just like, yeah, it's probably the best way to play him, but I just don't feel great about it.
No, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, if you're gonna play the fight, and if I don't even know if I'm going to, but that's the only way I would look to play it.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. Thomas Peterson, Jamal Pogus. Current price on Peterson, I believe minus 163. Comeback on Pogus plus 143. I took some early money on Pogues around plus 200, a little bit north of that. I actually think there's probably value at the spot right now. The reason I haven't gone big on the Pogue side is just like, dude, I mean, this guy showed up after eating a fucking house like in his last fight in England, and it does make me question how serious he's taking his training. So it's like, even though I do think skill wise it's a decent fight for him, I want to see him actually show up on the scale at like a decent weight and actually look like he's taking it seriously before I actually invest like real size in him again. But with that said, with the matchup, man, I mean, Thomas Peterson, we want to talk about guys who have beaten nobody. Like, he really got about the friendliest regional and contender series run you could have. The only fight he took that was not very friendly, actually, even that fight was friendly, was Waldo Acosta a couple years ago when Acosta couldn't grapple at all. But he gassed out down the stretch of that fight and got knocked out by Acosta. You know, I look at Thomas Peterson, I'm like, yeah, he's a decent wrestler, and he goes for it a lot, which obviously that's a great skill at heavyweight. But you look at the rest of his game, and he just doesn't seem like a real fighter. He doesn't seem like he likes to get hit. He's got bad gas if he has to wrestle hard. He's tiny for the heavyweight division. I just feel like this is going to be a guy who, you know, is kind of your classic minus 1,000 plus 1,000 type guy where, you know, the fights he wins, he's very likely to look dominant, but if he can't dictate the game, he's likely going to get lit up and lose most of those fights. And on the other side, you got Pogues. And look, I just said, you know, concerns about Pogues taking it seriously. You can't unsee, you know, that weigh-in and that performance in England in his last fight. But at the same time, it was in England. Like, that's his second UFC fight, and he's fighting in England. You know, he is. It's funny because I keep hearing people talk about, you know, Pogue's size. It's like, oh, you know, he's a light heavyweight who blew up to 265. He doesn't even belong here. And it's like, Pogues is like way bigger than Peterson is. I think he's like 2 or 3 inches taller with 3 or 4 inches of reach. So, I mean, of the two, he's much closer to a real heavyweight. He comes from a grappling background. You know, I've seen Pogues mix it up grappling with much better grapplers than Peterson. You know, in particular, Alex Polizzi, you know, he got submitted by Polizzi, but it was 4 rounds into the fight. He was scrambling pretty effectively with him up to that point in the fight. My biggest concern with Pogues is just that maybe because he's put on so much mass, he's got less dexterity and athleticism to kind of move around off his back. But I haven't seen anything to make me think, I mean, dude, this guy's been grappling since he was 8 years old. He knows how to grapple. I really don't think it'll be easy for him to get controlled on the mat here by Thomas Peterson. And frankly, I'm not sure it'll be easy for Peterson to get him down. And, you know, on the feet, I feel, you know, I wish Pogues had more volume, but to me, he's clearly the better striker. I actually think Pogues is a fairly talented fighter. You know, he's got a really nice jab, decent boxing, decent head movement. He's kind of good at drawing guys into counters. He's just operating at a different level than Peterson there. So it's like, from a technical perspective, I like Pogues in this fight. And then, like, when you go and like zoom out, I mean, Pogues is way more experienced. It's his 3rd fight in the UFC. It's Peterson's 1st. He fought a better regional level of competition. He's obviously fought better in the UFC. He's the bigger guy. And it's like the kind of perfect time to buy back on Pogues, who was a favorite to Parkin in his last fight. And now everybody's like, you know, he's not taking it seriously. This midget of a heavyweight, this hobbit, Thomas Peterson, should be a favorite against him. So yeah, I like Pogues here. What are your thoughts?
Definitely not as passionate to take a view, John, on this fight. I think it's.
I wouldn't say it's passionate, but I
know. But yeah, no, I think it's just a pretty sloppy, low-level fight. I understand Peterson being like slight to moderate favorite just because, like you touched on, him going for it on the feet. I think he's got a lot more power than Pogues. Obviously, not technical striker that Pogues is. And he has a bit of wrestling upside. Again, like you touched on as well, the control, not a great control wrestler. But yeah, I just kind of see those slight advantages for him in the fight. Pogues, not a huge hitter, not a huge volume guy either. So,
yeah, agreed. Moving on, we got Markel Medeiros taking on Landon Quinones. Current price, Medeiros minus 130. Comeback on Quinones plus 110. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
So I think we're going to be on opposite sides here, but I do like the Medeiros side for a small play. I largely just think it's mostly a striking fight, and it's largely just a striking fight. And I just think Medeiros is the cleaner, crisper striker, better offensively, better defensively. I know there's probably been some talk about just Medeiros grappling in general. I think it's largely a wash in this fight and in general. I don't think he's going to have much success at the UFC level with his grappling. But yeah, I like Medeiros in the spot.
I bet Quinones at like plus 150. At the current price, I feel like you could do whatever with it. Like maybe you could make an argument for Quinones pick the slight favorite, but I'm not too keen on it. I think the current price is probably fine. Yeah, I mean, I guess looking at it, I feel like there's a lot of big question marks surrounding both guys. Obviously, they're both kickboxers. Both of them rely pretty heavily on low kicks. To your point, we've seen both of them try to grapple at times in, regionally and prior to the UFC. I don't really think either has much chance to have big success, though. I've seen some takes from Medeiros out grappling him, but Medeiros is another one of these guys who loses positions all the time. I feel like that's going to mostly be a stalemate. And so I expect him to strike. And, I feel like I just have more data on the Quinones side. The guy fought Nasrat Haqparast, who's like a firmly mid-tier lightweight in the UFC, and threw 350 strikes that fight, showed he's durable, shows he has great cardio. Seeing cardio hold up against an actual like UFC fighter, to me is more meaningful than anything we've seen Markel Medeiros really do. Medeiros, even that guy Isakov he fought on Contender Series, he basically stuffed 2 takedowns and that guy kind of just gassed out and quit. And prior to that, he hasn't beaten anybody of really any consequence. He fought he lost last year, a split decision to Santiago Guzman simply because he just didn't do enough. And that has a tendency to happen with him. I feel like he doesn't have the best defense ever. I feel Quinones doesn't either, to be clear. So I kind of look at it. I trust the knowns about Quinones more. I think Medeiros, his game is sexier. It looks better. I think he hits a bit harder. Obviously, he comes from a pretty good gym in Factory X. And so I understand why people like Medeiros. But to me, and, Luke just mentioned it in the chat, it's like Quinones came in on very short notice to be fed to Nasrat. And he came in there and put up a fight. And then even prior to that, 2 years prior, he actually fought Imavov on the regional scene and went to a split decision with him. So it's like I've seen Quinones actually compete with guys who have multiple wins at the UFC level, whereas Medeiros, I've seen him look kind of sketchy against guys who are not even ever going to sniff the UFC. So yeah, I'm happy to lead with the Quinones side here. I think he 1.5 units for me. It's nothing passionate, but I do think he's the side for me. Moving on, though, we have I have another bet here. We got Dolidze Stoliarenko taking on Luana Carolina. Current price, Stoliarenko minus 133. Come back on Carolina plus 113. I bet Stoliarenko small, minus 123 here. Ultimately, it's a couple things. I feel, the most common take you're going to find about Dolidze Stoliarenko is armbar or bust, first round armbar, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly she's won most of her wins have come via armbar. What no one really talks about with respect to Stoliarenko, though, is she pushed Alexis Davis and Julia Avila deep into fights. This was like pre-pregnancy Julia Avila. Not easy fights to have, and she was competing and in some cases winning the stand-up for large portions of those fights. So I feel like her being armbar or bust is kind of overstated. It could happen. She gasses out. But like you look at the other side in Carolina, and I feel like Carolina potentially is getting a bit too much respect off her last win. You and I both bet her against Petrovic in her last fight, but that was like you had this like 5-win Russian chick who'd fought nobody coming in and fighting somebody in the UFC. I mean, it was a pretty easy fade. But like beyond that, Petrovic was an obvious fraud. She fought Lupi on short notice, who was outsized by 25 pounds. She barely got over the finish line to win a split decision against Poliana Botelho. She beat Priscilla, and that's it. That is her UFC run, or her UFC wins. And her losses are to Ariane Lipsky, Molly McCann, and Joanne Wood. I look at Carolina, and I'm like, I know she's got a bunch of UFC wins, but she's done really like nothing of consequence. Like the people she is beating are like do not belong in the UFC. Like pretty much any of them except Lupi, who was outsized by like 30 pounds in that fight. So I look at this fight and I feel the common refrain is Carolina's going to outstrike her if they stay standing. I mean, I would take the versions of Julia Avila and Alexis Davis standing over Carolina pretty comfortably, personally. I kind of think Dolidze's got an edge standing here. I do think she has a sizable edge grappling if she gets on top, though I don't think that'll be easy. But I wouldn't be shocked if she gets the first round armbar. But ultimately, I think she's got edges everywhere. The best argument for Carolina is cardio. But, you go watch Carolina when she fought Priscilla. Priscilla was dead gas in the third round of that fight, and she wasn't letting her hands fly or anything. It's not like she's going to be some berserker who's coming forward and pressuring Dolidze down. She's going to let it be a low-paced, tepid fight. So, to me, we have one woman who has far more finishing upside than the other in Dolidze, and then on minutes, it should be competitive. So, with that being the dynamic, I feel like Dolidze's got to be at least minus 150 in this spot. So, I bet her small. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
So on top of like the whole like round one or bust like narrative thing, like it's all with context. And with a fight like this with Carolina, like she's just not a good defensive grappler. So could easily see Stoliarenko winning 2 out of 3 rounds, no issue. My issue with her is she doesn't seem to conserve her energy well at all. She seems to just go pretty balls to the wall in that first round. And she doesn't get it, then again, cardio kind of tapers off a bit. So I understand just kind of trepidations here. But yeah, I think should be a good fight for her just because I think Carolina is such a poor defensive grappler.
Yeah, but like I'll say this because I've seen people say to play Stoliarenko sub or sub 1.
The under. Oh yeah,
dude, that's like there's no you're gonna play plus 200 for sub like that. There's not
right.
It's being priced into the line.
The under's like barely plus 1. I think it's like plus 120 maybe, and that's again mostly Stoliarenko.
On a sub early.
Yep.
Yeah. That's I just feel like that's something, we started talking about at the end of last year, but like you look at prices like that. If everybody's saying it, you're not going to.
And we literally talked about it like I think not last week because obviously you weren't here, but the week you were on, we were literally talking about it then. It's like people, when there's everybody talking about a certain narrative, it's already likely priced in.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So,
moving on, though, cool fight. Junyoung Lee, he's making his debut in the UFC. He's taking on Blake Bilder. Current price, Lee minus 141. Comeback on Bilder, plus 121 up. Wags, any thoughts, sir?
So another guy that I think does, or I guess I should say, not another guy, we had Stoliarenko, but another person who I think doesn't conserve their energy well in Lee. Like I think, again, he throws pretty much 100% into his strikes. The guy's got power, no doubt, but he's pretty low volume. I don't think his cardio is good. And in any of these recent grappling fights, I mean, there's just a lot of sketchy moments. Obviously, like him being held down, but I just don't like his defensive nature against the cage and this and that in the clinch. My problem with Bilder though is I don't rate his wrestling that highly. On the feet, the guy just kind of skirts and tries to avoid damage a bit. Like he's super hittable, no doubt, but like he kind of avoids the fight a little bit. So I sort of want to play the under 2.5 just because I do feel like if Bilder does get on top, he can finish. And then conversely, if this stays standing, I think Lee can finish him. But like I see a lot of instances where Lee's just trying to track him down, Bilder's skirting the cage bit. Just a lot of just time flying by, I should say. So it's a pass for me. I lean Lee. I think Lee probably does knock him out early though.
Yeah, it's a tough one to break down. I really, really, really wanted to bet
Bilder,
Bilder
right?
in this fight.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'd say you're a grappler guy, John. Yep.
Yeah, but and he's he's the vet. He's got multiple UFC fights. But like when you look at this, I really feel like they're trying to set Lee up to get a knockout here. Not to go too narrative crazy,
right?
But like the road to UFC finals were supposed to be like that night as the post limbs here.
I didn't even.
Obviously, Junyoung Lee is the road to UFC winner from last time. Plus, it's like this kid's obviously young, reasonably talented. If you wanted to put him in there with someone to knock out, someone like no head movement at all, who gets wobbled almost every fight, like Blake Bilder, is probably the guy you'd look to do it with. What I do like about, I shouldn't say, like, I think it's just a weird fight because Lee hasn't fought anybody who skirts the cage like Bilder, but I also don't think Bilder is a particularly good striker. I could see his movement giving Lee some issues here, and this just turning into a close kind of low volume decision. But at the same time, Bilder is just so easy to counter over jab. It doesn't really seem like he's taking himself like particularly seriously. Like, did you see that video Sean shared of him knocking out that dude at his gym? Like, it's very. He does not seem like a very serious. Yeah, he does not seem like a very serious MMA fighter to me. I feel Bilder's margins, to your point, he doesn't wrestle that often. I think he can get a back take here. I do, but he's not going to come out and shoot 10 takedowns. Like if you're lucky, Bilder's going to shoot 2 or 3 takedowns if you're betting Bilder. And so it's going to be mostly them striking. And it's like, can Bilder either knock him out or outpoint him? Yes, he could do both of those things. But do I rate that when Lee's probably going to have the front foot, be throwing harder? He's the guy who's probably made many more improvements than Bilder has fight to fight. Not really. And you combine that with the fact that, Lee's obviously a guy the UFC's trying to feature since they're trying to feature Asia in general. I'm okay passing it. I kind of lean the Bilder side, but I'm not. I don't really want to be involved.
So what do you feel about the under then? If you like the Bilder side,
dude, I don't. The thing is, I feel kind of similar to you, where it's like if you told me they get into like a war here, I'd feel great about it, obviously. But Bilder, Bilder just dragged Kyle Nelson into one of the lowest tempo fights. Like,
ever. I know. I bet the under there.
And like I could see that happening though. It seems like even the Shane Young fight, like there was a lot of volume landed, but it's not like Bilder bites down and hangs in the pocket long. With these guys, it's kind of in and out. So,
and on top of that, Lee doesn't throw a ton. Not traditionally,
I've heard very, very few people make the case for the over. I've heard a lot of people make the case for the under, which is like also kind of like yeah. And meanwhile, the lines are like pick 'em. So
right.
I don't know. I don't really like. I just don't really want to have money on an under where I know that one of the guys is going to do everything he can to avoid extended exchanges. So yeah, it's. But I do. I would take the under over the over. So,
right. All right.
Moving on though, interesting fight here. I'll throw it to you again, Lags. We got Azat Maxim. He's taking on Charles Johnson. Current price Maxim is -220. Charles Johnson +185. What are your thoughts?
Never Charles Johnson again after the Ode Osborne fight. I mean, to be honest, this guy just lets his opponents dictate pace too much, both in the striking and in the grappling. Like even if he's not being held down too long. He's held against the cage. He's just in defensive positions. It should be a good fight for Maxim, really.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I bet 4 units on him against Rafael Estevam.
Oh, wow.
That was a very, very winnable fight for him. Yep. My issue is it's not even. I could deal with him getting held onto and clung to and being taken down. It's when he disengages, like first round against Estevam. He finally gets up. He briefly disengages and then re-engages the clinch. And it's like, motherfucker, what are you doing? And then round 2, again, he gets off. He gets Estevam off him with about a minute and a half left. And all he has to do is just pull the trigger. That's it. He's got him right in front of him. Just pull the fucking trigger and you'll win the round. The guy's done no damage on bottom. And he doesn't do enough to win that round. And finally, round 3 is gas. But like that was a winnable fight that he just let get away from him. And I look at this fight and like, I don't think Maxim is very, very good, but anybody who's going to push a grappling pace on Charles, it's just like, can you really trust him to do enough? He doesn't have much KO equity. He's very easy to hold on to, and he just doesn't really seem to prioritize winning minutes. He keeps talking about it in his interviews, but he did this before the Estevam fight. And so, like, I'm at the point where it's like, I've lost so much money trusting Charles Johnson to not do retarded things that I'm like, I'll adjust my priors the day he actually comes out and pushes a pace on one of these guys, When that happens, fine. I'll believe we have a different fighter. But until then, it's just like, okay, is the number intriguing? Yes, because I don't think Maxim is that good. But at the same time, like, the number's intriguing until there's 3 minutes left in the fight, and it's like, oh my God, Charles is in the body lock on the fence again. Like that's
or they're just standing and you're like, oh my God, Charles, can you throw a little bit more, buddy? Come on, please.
Yeah. Something I told myself for this year, it is okay to pass. It does not matter that I don't like Azat Maxim. Yes. It is okay to pass on this fight.
For sure. It's okay to pass on a lot of spots. We got fights every weekend.
Oh yeah. Moving on. Molly McCann, Diana Belbita. Molly, big favorite here. -263. Come back on Belbita, +223. I think the line's fine. I guess you could make a case that Belbita has gotten older and gotten better since their first fight, which is probably true. But I mean, she still kind of stinks as far as I'm concerned. Okay striker. She's got like decent physicality on the feet, but her grappling is still. I mean, she lost the first fight because Molly mugged her in the grappling. Her grappling is still fucking shit. I mean, Maria Oliveira was taking her down with out too much difficulty. Maria Oliveira is a terrible grappler. So I mean, I'm not gonna try to reinvent the wheel here. We've seen this fight once. Maybe Belbita improves enough that she can win it this time. It wouldn't be inconceivable. Molly's always been fairly overrated, but I would argue, if anything, Molly off a couple losses now has probably gone from being hugely overrated to probably either properly rated or underrated. So yeah, I mean, I think Molly should roll. I don't have much to say. She should be able to grapple with her. I think even striking, she's probably the better boxer here. Yeah, I lead Molly. What are your thoughts, Lex?
Yeah, I would say properly rated would probably be the way I would go about it. And yeah, no, I think she has a large grappling path here. The interesting number to me in this fight would be the under, but not just the under, more so just Molly sub. Molly sub is like 650. That's probably how I would target it. But yeah, because first I was looking at the under, but then I'm kind of like thinking about it. I'm like, these girls are fairly tough. I think more often than not, if it is a finish, it's a sub by either women. So, and all largely, I think, again, Molly has a distinct grappling advantage. So.
Yeah, agreed.
I like it.
Moving on, throw it to you here. We got Gilbert Urbina. He's taking on Charles Radke. Current price, Urbina minus 202. Come back on Radke plus 172. What are your thoughts here?
This is another low-level fight, really, but I feel like Radke's not UFC caliber. I think Urbina, both in the striking and in the grappling, again, I think he's probably fine. Not a lot of thoughts from me. I just think Radke's pretty low level.
I personally think Urbina's awful, but I also kind of tend to agree with you about Radke.
It's okay
I don't like either of them. I just feel like if you're rewatching Urbina Kosi, like Kosi didn't even really fight. You know, he literally didn't even fight back for most of that fight. So
He's
it's like, well, what do I put into that? No. So I don't put much stock in that fight. And other than that, we have him kind of quitting against Battle, but it was on short notice. Him walking his way onto the same left hand over and over from Tresean Gore and getting knocked out. And then him going basically life and death with Angelo Trevino in Combate, which is a pretty ugly look. I just feel like Urbina is all physicality. And I also get the feeling from him that, like, if he can't just bully you, he kind of wilts and gets pounded. But Radke, to your point, I don't think is very good either. Very poor defense, gas tank a bit suspect. I mean, he's kind of like a lunch pail guy. Like, he's got decent boxing. He's an okay grappler, but nothing special. Ultimately, I think Urbina's size and physicality is probably a bit too much for him here, which is why I didn't bet Radke. The one thing I am kind of interested in, Radke decisions like plus 500. I'm waiting to see what FanDuel opens it at, but I think that's kind of interesting to me, just because I don't think Radke carries a ton of power in his hands. And I could very easily imagine a scenario where Radke ends up, on top, controlling Urbina, especially as the fight starts to get later. But I don't know if I'll play it or not. It's just something interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that Urbina is going to win. I don't really have much interest in Charles in this fight. Moving on, we got Ali Khizriev taking on Mahmoud Muradov. I bet Muradov for a unit and a half at plus 156. I am considering adding on Muradov round 2 and round 3 small, which I think were like plus 1,000 and plus 1,600 if I'm not mistaken. I'm not, and I don't say this to say that I think Muradov's a lock or anything of that nature. I just feel like Khizriev is I think he's a bigger unknown than like anybody kind of realizes here. He's being treated as kind of one of your classic, Russian dominators. But when you go back and look at this guy's, his career and his strength of schedule, I mean, he's really fought no one. Like, his best win is either Dennis Talulin or Rusumar Paharis, who is like 45 years old. I just don't really. Sorry, I was reading a comment. I don't really rate anybody that Khizriev's beaten. And when you look at the fights he's had, yeah, his wrestling looks good. I do think he's a quality wrestler. But he's got no striking defense. He throws hard, but he's very, very easy to hit. I mean, you look at him, and then you look at his size, and it's like the guy used to fight at welterweight. He's 5'9" with a 74-inch reach. He's coming in there with basically muffin tops, in his last fight and in this fight. Yeah, that's how he looks. Like, this guy does not need to be at 185. And at his frame, he can make 170 very, very easily, And he's ultimately choosing not to do that. On top of which, he's fought once in the last 4 years, which is also kind of if you're trying to like win a title or really take your MMA career seriously, that's a bit odd. Especially when he's 33 years old now. And so now he's coming in here and he's fighting Muradov. And I mean, it's a titanic step up in competition. He's fighting a guy who's a lot bigger than him in Muradov, who's a natural middleweight, who actually has really good footwork along the cage, really good counter striker. He's going to get punished when they're on the feet. I have very little doubt about that. The big question is just the grappling exchanges, because obviously Muradov, we've seen some ugly stuff from him on bottom in the past, but Muradov went pretty much 50-50 with Kaio, and I think I'd make Kaio like a decent-sized favorite against Khizriev. And I actually, while I don't rate Muradov's jiu-jitsu particularly highly, I think he actually does like a pretty decent job of kind of timing space and grappling exchanges. And what I mean by that is he's very, very good at timing exactly when to explode and using that to get back up. So I don't think it's a lock at all that Khizriev controls him here. And on top of that, I think Khizriev getting down a much bigger, stronger, athletic fighter could be pretty problematic. So it's like we're getting to fade this guy who's fought nobody, who's outsized for the division and has potentially bad gas against, pretty solid UFC fighter. Obviously, Muradov has had issues with cardio in the past as well, but I kind of feel like if Khizriev is in a place where he's going to lose this fight, he's likely going to be coming up short on the takedowns and just getting punched in the face hard pretty often. And if that's happening, I think it's pretty good chance he gets finished down the stretch in this fight. So yeah, I lean Muradov at the price. I'm picking him outright here. And I think I like him for a late finish. What do you think, Legs?
So I'm debating whether or not I'm going to play Muradov. Kind of what you touched on there really is just the cardio for me, because later in fights, to me, his cardio just, again, tapers off a ton when we have a lot of grappling exchanges like this. And not to mention, even in the striking, like, don't get me wrong, he's a great striker, but I feel like his volume is not great. It's a lot of just big shots, big kicks, big punches. It's not a ton of combinations strung together. So, I mean, I could see like it being a closer-ish fight in that regard, but I don't disagree that, it's pretty much an absolute wash on the feet that Muradov, or not wash, I should say, huge advantage on the feet.
I thought you were saying, I was like, are you crazy?
I wasn't saying wash. I was saying wash in the terms of like he washes him out on the feet. That's what I meant to say. Like, that kind of, but yes, no, I'll lean Muradov here as well.
Moving on, we got Viviane Araujo taking on Natalia Silva. Current price, Silva is a big favorite, unsurprisingly. She's minus 350. Comeback on Araujo, plus 285. What are your thoughts here?
You're betting Vivi, aren't you, John? Off the top here.
No.
Yeah? No.
So what are your thoughts?
Okay. No, I was just asking. I know I was asking you about that. No, I do. I mean, I think Vivi's grappling could trouble Silva, but the issue when we talk about it pretty much every time Vivi fights is just that her cardio drains when she tries to employ a wrestle heavy game. And so her boxing is decent as well, but she's pretty hittable on the feet. Again, the cardio, like I just talked about, I think Silva's going to land hard and often on the feet. I could see her having a late finish, but I just think for the most part, she just neutralizes most of the grappling.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to bet Vivi, honestly. Like you weren't wrong about that. Like, but okay. I bet Lee against her last fight, and the problem is, like to your point, I feel if Vivi is going to pursue a wrestling heavy game plan, she's got to have quick success. Otherwise, she's going to gas out and get finished down the stretch here. And I'm not sure she can do that because I think Silva seems very, very strong to me and pretty competent takedown defense. I do think there is some upside to Vivi catching kicks here. Silva does like to throw that front kick to the body quite a bit. And so I think Vivi catching a couple kicks and getting her down is not impossible. But beyond that, I think it'll be tough. In the striking, if Vivi can keep her in the pocket, I think she can win that. I think she's a better boxer than Silva is. The problem is, and I've said this about Vivi her whole career, Vivi just lets people get way out ahead on the strike count. She can't cut the cage. Anybody who doesn't stand directly in front of her, I mean, just about everybody tends to outland her, but anybody who doesn't stand directly in front of her tends to outland her very, very badly. And, Natalia Silva, is not going to just sit there and trade with her. She's going to be moving this entire fight. And so I just can't really see Vivi winning minutes standing here. I think she needs takedowns. And I think if they don't come, she's very likely to gas out. And so I want to fade Silva because I do think she's getting for someone whose best win is Andrea Lee, it feels like she's getting too much respect. But this fight, we're going to end up getting something stupid like a Caitlin Chikagian at like plus 200 against her or something like that. I'd much rather have that, someone I know can match her skill for skill, than trusting Vivi to not just fight optimally, but succeed fighting optimally and not gas out doing it. I'm kind of happy to fade that. The under is kind of interesting. Our boy Liam made a decent case earlier today for the under, especially with Vivi giving away 10 years in age. She's been hurt badly a couple times in recent fights. And Natalia does seem to hit different for a woman. So like the under is like plus 240, which I think is kind of interesting, especially because even if you think Vivi's competitive here, if she gets takedowns, I think she's live to sub her. So I might take a shot at the under. What are your thoughts, Legs?
I mean, she was hurt by Reebok.
On the under. Yeah,
she was hurt by Reebok standing. So I mean, yeah. I like
Andrea Lee too.
Yep.
Andrea Lee also. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty interesting way to play this fight. Moving on. Randy Brown, Muslim Salikov. Current price on Brown minus 280. Come back on Salikov plus 240. Weird fight. I mean, I've always been a Randy Brown guy, but Randy Brown's the guy you want to bet as an underdog, not as a minus 300 favorite ever, really. So I will not be on him here. I think it's an interesting fight. Obviously, Salikov is much, much older. I think he's like 6 or 7 years older. He's almost 40 now. Giving away a lot of height and a lot of reach to Brown. Skill-wise, though, I think Salikov's the better fighter. He's a very good kicker. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of burst while he's fresh. He's probably almost definitely the better wrestler of the two guys here. And so I can see how Salikov can make this close. Just the big problem with Salikov is the cardio just seems to be it seems to be going faster and faster with each passing fight. And if he starts slowing down with a guy like Brown in there, who's going to throw like knees, elbows, and like nasty attritional stuff, in close, he could easily get finished down the stretch here. And it's like in general, I don't really want to be on someone as old as Salikov, who seems like he's already going over the cliff. The one thing I think is kind of interesting to me, and again, I don't know if I'll bet it, but I've seen the Salikov decision to plus 550. And I know I'm talking about the cardio and now I'm making a case for his decision, but I could see Salikov's power potentially deterring Brown. Brown's not exactly the most aggro, prolific output guy to begin with. And so if that happens, you could be talking about 1 or 2 Salikov takedowns for maybe him janking a decision at plus 550. It just feels like that should be more than 15% Salikov kind of winning a close decision, but I have no passion about it. Brown should win. He's got all the kind of macro edges in this fight. What are your thoughts, Lex?
Well, on top of that, if you like that, I would just go split as well. Throw a little on the split decision.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at too, just because I think this is a Randy Brown, like minus EV type of a decision. So like any kind of Salikov, again, big juicy decision props or split decision props, I don't hate it just because Randy just never wins by margin, really. I mean, his best fight was the Turman fight, last fight. And again, where are the margins there? Hardly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I completely agree. Moving on though, co-main event of the evening, Renato Moicano. He's taking on Drew Dober. Moicano all the way up at minus 188. The comeback on Dober plus 163. What are your thoughts here, Lags?
Moicano wants money. It's a co-main event spot now. Honestly, I was hoping for a great under 2.5 number here. Obviously, that's not the case. The under 1.5 is like minus 130. Hard to feel passionate about that for sure. I do think, again, Moicano has a pretty sizable grappling edge, but again, we've seen this story so many times that like big power puncher against Moicano doesn't have the greatest chin. Like Dober, I could easily see Dober putting him out. I could easily see Moicano grounding him and finding a sub on the ground. So that's why I was opting for the under, but I lean more so on the Moicano side. I think he's just a more technical striker too, even though he might not be the bigger hitter of the two.
Yeah, I initially bet Moicano at minus 135, but then when that line exploded yesterday and he went out to minus 190, I cashed out of it. Just the more I thought, like I agree with your take in that I think Moicano is the better fighter of the two. I'm pretty sure he's the better technical striker. He's obviously taller and a bit longer. And obviously, if he gets inside, like on top of Dober, pretty good chance Dober doesn't get back up. But I mean, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I feel like I'm missing something. And I did a bit more like tape on it. And if you go back a bit, Drew Dober, I mean, the guys that have really wrecked Drew Dober on the ground are like Benny Dariush, who had trouble getting him down, Islam Makhachev, those, like the best grapplers in the division. And it's like the guys Moicano is wrecking on the mat are Jai Herbert and Alexander Hernandez. It's not Damir Hadzovic.
Damir Hadzovic, really I was just going to say. Yeah.
Not guys who aren't great grapplers. And like, don't get me wrong, I do think if Moicano can get on top of him, I do think he can hold him down because Moicano is a very, very good grappler. But his wrestling isn't all that physical. And it's like when I went back and watched the Dariush fight, Dariush went for a lot of the same takedowns Moicano likes to. And Dariush is a lot stronger than Moicano is. And he struggled badly to get Dober down for the first 7 or so minutes of that fight. I don't think it's going to be easy for Moicano to get him down there. And if he can't, they're going to be swinging. Now, I do think Moicano can win a fight where they're swinging, to be clear. I honestly think he's probably the more skilled striker of the two. The difference is the hardware difference is just insane here, though. Dober hits a lot harder and is way more durable than Moicano. So, like, and Moicano...
And probably has a better cardio, too, just to chime in there. I think Dober has a little bit better cardio. Yeah.
It's probably close. But Moicano... What worries me about him, it's not even that he'll get hurt. I feel like his instincts to getting hurt are terrible. Like, he doesn't shoot or clinch up. He kind of just stands there. Like, you watch the Aldo fight, and like the dude gets rocked, and it's just like, starts wildly swinging. Yeah. Instead of just like, it's like clinch up, shoot a takedown, do anything, So, yeah, I don't know. I just have bad vibes about it. I feel like I feel like I was betting on the grappler against the guy who's not a great grappler, but the grappler has grappled many guys that are even decent grapplers. So I'm happy to just pass here. I'd honestly lean over more than anything else. I feel like they might have a lot of time in the clinch, but I don't need to be involved in it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say 1.5. Yeah, for sure.
I will say, though, Lags, I feel like if you like Moicano, either his KO, although I'm less inclined on that, or like Moicano decision are much more interesting than his money line. I don't really think it's a lock that he subs Dober. Everybody keeps saying this. If he gets it down,
I would say decision's not a bad play. But what's the number on that now?
350.
Not bad.
It's not horrible. I mean, it took Makhachev 12.5 minutes to sub Dober. I feel this assumption that Moicano gets him down, he taps him. That's just like
a little bit of false narrative.
Kind of silly. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. We got Roman Dolidze taking on Nassourdine Imavov. We got the main event here. Not something I ever thought I'd be saying is Dolidze versus Imavov in a main event, especially Dolidze. But Nassourdine Imavov minus 162 currently. Come back on Dolidze plus 142. What's your feeling here, Lex?
Fun main event. We've been Dolidze, faders and haters, I should say, for many years now. And to be honest with you, I don't think anything's really changed for me. I know a lot of people talk about the Vettori fight, but I don't know. To me, this guy's not a great minute winner and not a great wrestler. He, again, relies mostly on the grappling. Doesn't have great cardio. I think Imavov more often than not should be fine here. Much better striker. I think he's got better cardio as well. I think this should be Imavov personally, but not a passionate take.
Yeah, I don't really want. I don't want to. I will not bet aside in this matchup, and I will tell you why. Because I feel like my history with guys like Dolidze, guys who I aggressively have tried to fade and failed, and then turned around and tried to bet. That never ends well. Like, you don't want to be fading somebody and then buying them after they're,
That's the thing. I never a lot of these guys. I just never go and try to buy on them anyways. For the most part, I just list them as fades, and if anything, just try to stay off it like this spot.
But I've waffled back and forth because intuitively I feel like, obviously Imavov's got a lot of skills here that, should give Roman problems. He's faster, he's a bit sharper on the feet, comes from grappling background himself, so he shouldn't be a complete fish out of water there. It's like initially it's like, I'm going to bet Imavov, but then you look at it more and it's like, man, this guy got held on the fence by a totally gassed out Phil Hawes for like so long. I can't unsee it. And like, I have seen Dolidze do that to many, many people. hold people on the fence. Like, you look at the Staropoli fight. That basically the entire fight was him riding his back. Like, would it be that shocking if that happened here? On top of which, it's like you're paying juice for Imavov, but I think both of them are pretty durable, and I don't think either of them has a great gas tank. So it's like, what happens if both of them use a lot of energy in the first 2 rounds, and suddenly now you have 2 just dead gassed out guys at very low tempo fight for 3 more rounds? Like, I wouldn't feel great about him having a juice ticket on that, you know? So I don't know. I just feel like there's so much that can go. Plus, of course, there's also the meme-ness of Dolidze. You know, Roman Dolidze just finds a way to make things happen. You know, the Jack Hermanson fight, I had my worst night of 2022 that fight, and that was my last bet of the night was Hermanson. And like, as it was happening, I'm just like, this can't actually be happening right now. Like, how is this possible? So the point I'm making is Dolidze obviously always has very opportunistic upside to make opportunistic things happen. Neither guy has great cardio, so it could kind of devolve into kind of a low volume shitfest. I think Dolidze has more grappling upside, but I think Imavov is a superior striker. I ultimately think it's kind of a close fight, personally. You know, as much as, you know, I wanted to like Imavov because he's the flashier fighter, I think these guys will ultimately prove to be competitive. What I do like here that I'm probably going to play is the over. The over 2.5 minus 160 currently. I guess I could see Imavov knocking him. I could see either knocking the other out, but I kind of think it's going to be kind of low pace exchange wise here. And Roman's probably going to do some clinching. And I also like the GTD, which is like plus 185, because if they do slow down, I feel like it's just going to get ugly and be a really, really unwatchable fight. So I'll be on the over. I'll probably have a poke on the GTD. But yeah, I mean, my pick to win the fight is probably Imavov, but I honestly think if I was going to bet aside, it would be Roman. Dude, the guy just overachieves everything we do. I mean,
he does.
He went to a split decision with Marvin Vettori. Like, Marvin Vettori's a top 5 guy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I laid over 2-1 on him. Yeah,
me too. Me too. So
I was gonna say real quick, in a fight like this, I would rather lay juice on the over than Imavov.
I agree, but that's the thing, though, right? It's like we laid juice on Marvin Vettori against him. It's like you can't, and I felt like it was a horrible bet. You cannot tell me that laying juice on Imavov is very intelligent if like Vettori was not intelligent. It's just like, I know it's different. I know the styles are different, but like Roman has outperformed market expectations every fight of his career, you know?
And that's my thing, even with the over too. It's like, yes, it's more often than not, you're just fading like an opportunistic finish early, but like, do I want to do that with Roman?
I know.
He does it all the time, man. It's crazy. He pulls the cat out of the bag.
Fucking Roman. But anyway, guys, that'll do it for tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday. Back to our normal time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Good card. We're talking Joe Bodybags Piper, Jack Hermanson. I got some hot takes on that card. Actually made a couple bets on it today. So excited to talk about it. But guys, if you like the show, drop a like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, MMA Fogs, Lags at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and have a good week and good luck this weekend. Peace, everybody.